So here I just want to go over what I have planned for 2.0 of the armor and what I'm working on. I also want to go over what a couple of things, the reasons why, because as previously I mentioned, the armor wasn't worth printing. It was better just to do, rather just to make it out of foam than to print it. So kind of reason why I'm revisiting it so I can make it for printing and everything else. I want to go over the differences between the two armors and what I plan on doing differently. So to start off, before we get into this, where it's Photoshop, yes. So version 2.0, version 1 of the armor. This is the original model. This was designed with the intent. This was a Pt2 file. So this was meant to be unfolded in Pt2, printed out on paper, cardstock, and then cut into foam and shaped and everything else. It doesn't have a lot of detail on it. That's because a lot of that's going to be done with the foam afterwards. That way, each person making the armor can add the level of detail that they are most comfortable with based off of their costuming abilities and whatnot. So very simple forms and everything else. And as we go in and everything. Unfortunately, though, this design, as you can already start to see on the human body shape that's underneath it, you already start to see that it's not quite conforming properly to the human anatomy. For instance, here it would be the bottom of the rib cage. This armor is actually above it, whereas it should go below it. This would be a plate on, so this would be at the top of this. This would be at right there at the sternum, covering the sternum, and then this would bend with the abdominals. As you can see, also as well, here's where the actual socketed joint for your shoulder is. This is a muscle over here, but here's where the actual socketed, when you get your collarbone, here's where the actual socket is, and it's right in the path of where you need to bend your arm forward and bend your arm up. Makes it very difficult. So it's very broad-chested, as you see that there's the pectoral coming in underneath. And here's where the bottom of the pectoral would be. Your rib cage extends further below that, which is here. Over here with the bicep, as you can see, this is the cup where it cups the top of the bicep. The top of the bicep is actually right where it curves. It's actually right here. I mean, this whole portion's top, but this would sit lower, and this would sit flush. So you can see there's a gap. So made for a much larger arm, of course, but not for this arm. There's also a piece on the inside, which I opted out not to make just because this isn't modeled with the intent to fit around this arm. Of course, it doesn't conform. This model doesn't even conform to what it's modeled off of. Up here, as you can see, the thigh piece. Weird sort of silhouette thing going on here, but as you can see, the sort of thigh piece. Here's the edge. Here's your joint is going in on your hip bone, going into your leg. You see it extends above that, and it's very far inward. This will make it very difficult for you to bend your leg. This doesn't sit completely flush on top of the thing. As you can see, the arm isn't perfectly set in center of that. Again, this was made with the intent of making out of paper, so you can make this fit. You can easily make this fit. All you have to do is just reprint redo the scale, reprint the piece, and that's not. It's very quick, very easy. You can, doing this out of paper and everything else, and foam, you can conform this to fit to your body type extremely easy. This is how it's made to be intended. While it doesn't conform and fit to this model very well, you can conform and fit it to yourself with a heat gun and everything else very easily. So like these little details, though. Another thing too, the cod piece. These legs are kind of weird to go off of because he's thick. So he's got some thick thighs. So this cod piece would come down to the tip just below the groin, and then it would go up above the hip, but then it would go up. So this should be about here, and this model itself is also just weirdly proportionate because here's his hip, That's a lot to go down. Like, this needs to come up a little bit. So this is the model itself, the base mesh underneath has got some anatomical problems of its own. But also, this is, you see how thin this gets as it wraps around. And again, this is sitting on the hip. This needs to be sitting on the waist. So your hip is where is where your hip bone is. It's exactly where your hip bone is. Where the I think it's the femur. It sockets into it and everything else. So it's where your hip bone is. Easy as hell. It's right here. But your waist is up here. Your waist is where your love handles are. So that's where you need. That's where this actually needs to wrap around. But again, this torso is elongated. Like, seriously. Like, crazily elongated. But anyway, so maybe not the best model to model off, base mesh to model off of, but again, this was designed with the intent that you do make it out of paper, and then convert that over to foam, and it can be easily reshaped and molded to your body type. For the file that I was using to create my armor is this, but they converted it and gave it thickness, because each of the original thing is just it's a single face. It doesn't have any depth to it. It's just a single face model, hollowed out model, and it doesn't have any depth or thickness to it, so it can't, because it's going to be made out of paper. For 3D printing, it needs to have thickness so that you can print it. So the person just came in and they extruded it inwards, and extruded all the faces inwards to give it thickness. And I'm grateful that they did this, because this was a learning experience and everything else. I don't want to shit on the guy. I don't want to shit on his model and everything, the work that he did, because he did great work, and not a lot of people have done this. As I look through the 405th forums and everything else, so it's not something that a lot of people have been doing, and he did make the model release, so it's very, very awesome that he did all this work. But I mean, there's to make this for 3D printing, but the original, what he was using, was not designed for that purpose, for the purpose of 3D printing, which is what caused issues. I also noticed there were some issues, and this is also partly due to the software that I was using, which is Cura, which caused some issues, and some temperature problems due to what I didn't think about at the time. Was I was getting some temperature issues between the hotbed, because the hotbed was because I have my nozzle and I was printing at 200 degrees Celsius for the nozzle, which is good, which is your basic standard range of heat you want to print at for PLA. But I wasn't thinking about the fact that there's also the hot plate, which was running at 60 degrees, which is effectively increasing the temperature overall from the heat that it's emitting of the PLA. So as it got further away from, it started causing some weird warping issues and some weird layering cracks and everything else as the temperature changed, as the print got taller and further away from the printing bed. So I wasn't taking into account that the printing bed is also adding over to the overall printing temperature when it's extruding. But that caused some issues. But also I've noticed that there's some issues with this model versus other models that I've printed that have caused some weird layer cracking. So that's why I'm starting from scratch and making my own model. Well, anyways, like I said, fantastic that he did this, but I intend to do it better. So going into this, so this was all, and and a couple of things that I noticed that were different versus the armor is that the version of the armor that I think about, the one that comes to mind is, I didn't import it. Let's see. Give me a second. Oh shit. There we go. Sorry, you see all my files. That tons and tons of files. Shift. There you go. And then to Photoshop. Back. I thought I had everything set up beforehand, but I guess not. Alright, so going back into this. So what comes to mind when I do this is this. This is the model that I think about when it comes into mind. here is the model that's actually in game in Halo 5. So this is what he was. This is what this model was made from. As you can see, there's significant differences between. Oh, shit. So there's significant differences between these two. So, looking at it, so I said significant differences, similar differences. So, looking at it, the codpiece is, quite frankly, completely different. So you're looking at, so there's this little ridge at the bottom of the codpiece. It's kind of there. Not exactly the right shape. There's a recess in here, whereas it's a protrusion here. There's these square recesses, or rectangular recesses, as opposed to these circular little dots that are recessed in. Their overall shape is very streamlined, very flat shape that goes in and wraps around, whereas that shape doesn't actually exist there, and it's a thicker connection between this and the back plate. Another thing, looking at this too, with the chest, as you can see, it pretty spot on. This is a beefier guy, so he has beefier shoulders. So it's kind of following on like the inseam. Like right here is where his point of his arm bends. In here, it's kind of hidden back a little bit. But this doesn't extend past it. This is a solid line. The front of this doesn't come past it. Here you can see very clearly that here's where the center line is, and then it overlaps by this pectoral piece of the armor, whereas it doesn't do this here. It actually comes inward from this shape as opposed to the shape going further outward. So there's the line, and then it comes a little bit inward, and then it protrudes outward, and that's what kind of gives that shape. It's a little bit of a misunderstanding of perspective, but overall, so there's that shape. You can see this is on his hip. I mean, this is on his waist, because this is his hip right here. So there's his hip. This is right above the hip on the waist. This is coming down. This is the bottom of his rib cage, bottom of the sternum, or right there on top of the sternum, and then this is right across the abdominals. This is coming up above the abdominals too, right there, just below the belly button, which is where that would be. So there's some scalar differences. I'm not gonna solely shit on, because not everyone's an expert in anatomy. I'm not an expert in anatomy. I can't model a character. I just do hard surface mainly. I've modeled some characters, but I mainly do hard surface. The shape, this is clearly rounded as opposed to the more blocky shape that they've got going on here. But this is what you can clearly tell, though, that this is what this is modeled off of. When I think of the Mark IV variant armor from Halo Wars, I immediately think of this one. This is the immediate one that comes to mind. As you can see, there's a very different, a completely different codpiece. A lot of similarities, but there are, again, a lot of differences as well. This is broad. This one's actually got a broader chest to it, so this is actually more in line with what they used. But they get codpiece. It's a completely different shape. The other thing is the hip. Like, look how far up the hip it goes. Like, here's the hip right here, and then this doesn't go up the hip. This stays on the thigh. This is on top of the top of the muscle on the thigh, as opposed to. I've lost my layers again. Same thing with this, as opposed to see how far this comes up over onto the hip, as opposed to staying on the thigh where it needs to be. There's also a lot of bulky, like a layered suit underneath this, which also kind of like hides a lot of this anatomy, and makes this gap a little bit less prevalent. But that's a large gap, so. These are the things that I'm taking in mind and account when I'm in my armor. I'm not just trying to shit on this guy's armor. These are the details that I'm trying to take into account when I make my version 2 of the armor, which I'm making my version 2 based off of the Halo 5 variant. No, that's not Halo 5. The Halo 5 variant of the suit. And I'm using this one because I actually have this model. I actually have the in-game model that they use, with a very low res normal map. It's a 512 by 512. I know it's for fact it's not the one they use in the game. But it's a 5x12 normal map, which will make do. I think it's actually the model that's ripped from the website, because the website does a preview. Bungie.com does a preview for Halo 5. And so, oh, sorry, my audio just cut out, and I wasn't sure. So the I think the model and everything's actually ripped from Halo 5. No, from the website, not the actual in-game itself, because it's the in-game. The website has a 3D preview that has a very low res normal map on it. So I'm thinking that's actually where these files are ripped, and not actually from in-game. Either way, that I still have an accurate model to what was used in-game, and I'll go over some of the design, some of the actual design features into it, the things that they took into account when they made this. Oh shit, it's already 3:40. I gotta cut this short. So I have the in-game model, and this is what I'm using, and these are the design details that I'm taking into account as far as the ratio, the spacing between the chest plate and the cod piece, the way the thigh piece sits on, some of the design differences between that I'm taking into account for this, and everything else. So I'll go ahead and get. Now, one of the things I'm doing with my armor, so I'm going to make this full set of armor, 3D, all the detail that I need, that you would want from a 3D print. Because that was the thing, is the armor didn't have the detail that I made, didn't have the detail to justify 3D printing it. It was made to be printed out of paper, so it didn't have that detail into it, which is what you would want a 3D print, is to have that detail in. So so I'm going to make it so that it has all that detail, that makes it worth 3D printing as well, and everything that fits in mind about how you take it on, take it off, take it on, put it on, take it off, and we'll get into that. But I'm going to take some. So I will be making the full set, including the helmet and everything else, and I'll be releasing it somewhere when I get done, so everyone can download it and print it, whatever. And I might do requests to do other things, but for now, that's what I'm doing. But I'm also going to be doing. So I'm going to do the full suit, but I am going to be also doing an alternate backpack and maybe some alternate thighs. Because I don't really like these thighs too much, because I like that plating that's inside the Master Chief's armor. That has that little plating that comes inside that wraps around. And I also like his backpack more. So I like the Mark 6 backpack, which is what I'm looking at here. So I really like this backpack better. So I might be making it. So I'll probably be making this backpack, and then probably from where to go away. This is from Forbidden Dawn, because I really like that look. Going into it, he's got plating that goes down the spine. I really want to incorporate that too in my design, so I'll probably be borrowing his backpack from his from Halo 3, and then incorporate the spinal plating, and then I might incorporate these thighs instead. These have a very geometrical, less organic curvature design, which would fit more, but it also has the inside plating that'll fit more along the lines of the Mark IV armor. So I'm going to be mixing and matching and doing some kit bashing with this. But I will still make the full Mark IV armor from Halo 5, and then I will release it. I'll release it so people can use it as well. And I might do more armor sets in the future, but for now I just gotta get through this one. But I should probably show you this one before I start boasting about making more armor and everything else. I should probably actually show you what I'm doing, and so you can actually see. So going into Maya, which is where I'm doing this, we are looking at the so let's look at the original model. So this is the in-game model ish that they're using. This is with the normal map on. So this is from the game, from the Halo 5. full suit. Like I said, I'm going to go with this cod piece. Now, a couple of things I noticed interesting when they designed this is that... So, I thought this was separated. It didn't. I forgot that it was all in one set. So, they put in the padding for the first place. So you can actually see how the inside of this suit is supposed to be padded. They modeled in the padding, which I thought was kind of an insignificant detail, but and also an important one as well. But yeah, so you can kind of so when you're making this, you can actually kind of see where the armor was intended. Of course, this is a solid piece because there's no need to have that fully hollow. Same thing with like this down here, the thigh. But I mean, like, look at that. Like, they have all that padding in there. That's crazy. It actually gives me more of an idea on how I want to do this because I actually see where they put padding into it. A couple things. Big detail, very big detail I noticed in this is that there's this little piece down here, this buckle. This kind of gives me an idea on how this was intended to be attached. So, this kind of like unwraps like an arm. So, you're looking at the back, like this is like an arm that wraps around and hugs the front and clips onto the front of the breastplate, which I thought was I never noticed it at first, and then when I was actually breaking it down, when I was breaking it down for doing the high res, I noticed that, and I thought, that's cool. That was a cool thing, and that gave me an idea of what I wanted to do. So I'm making these as separate parts. So the back is going to be its own separate piece like this. Same thing with this, 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 and this. So these pieces will all have a point of rotation. Whatever. I forgot to reset my where is it? Windows, display, create, modify, center pivot. There you go. Forgot center my pivots. So these are going to be intentionally separate so that you'll be able to attach these either with an elastic band, whatever you want. You'll be able to wrap an elastic band around this so that you can then, so that you'll have a point of rotation here. And then you'll have another band here for a point of rotation. And then another one here for a point of rotation. And then here you'll have this clip for another point of rotation, which will then wrap around and clip onto the front, which however you want, magnets, Velcro, snaps, whatever you want. This will wrap around and then connect to the front. So that's how I'm actually going to design this to be attached. And that way you can rescale this to whatever, you can rescale these specific pieces to whatever shape that you need them to be. Without having to rescale the front or the back. Say you're a bigger person. I'm not a very big person, but say if you're a really big person, you got some meat on your bones, unlike me, who is a fucking skeleton. But so you get some meat on your bones. You can scale these pieces up. Specifically, this piece, you can scale this, make it wider, make it longer, scale it inward if you're slimmer. So you can scale these specific pieces without having to scale the entire armor to fit. These are already designed to sit where they need. The front, the chest plate, and the back plate are already designed to sit where they need to be. These aren't going to be anchored on your shoulder as much. This piece is also going to be separate. You can attach it here under the back, under the shoulder piece of the backpack, and then you can clip it and then have it to attach on the inside of the breastplate. So you have that space here that you can then attach it however you want on the inside. So you have like a Velcro strap that goes across here. So, and then that way this piece can move independently because as you lift your shoulders, you can have a wider range of movement. Now, I am modeling this I'm working off of this based off of the female variant of the armor. So, one of the big details about the female variant is that there's actually a lot of things that don't change about it as much as you think about it. One of the big changes with the female variant is the breastplate is actually, it doesn't extend out further or come back anymore. It's actually, it doesn't, as far as from the front to the back of the armor, there's no difference in scale. The only difference that will be seen is the way the shoulder sits, the way this is designed to sit on the shoulder. So this on the male portion, it's a little bit more outward. On this female, it's brought in a little bit more. This same with this piece, it's brought in a little bit more. This piece is also brought in a little. It extends a little bit further out on the male, and it's brought in a little bit more. Now the reason why I'm using this is because this will, again, I want this, as anyone wants this, to be able to move in it. So with the proportions that they used for the female variant, it allows for better ease of movement. It also makes it better for scaling, because it fits a more average body type instead of like a big, beefy, muscular dude. The more feminine frame of a Spartan, who is still incredibly muscular. Like this is a 7. I've scaled this to my height, which is 5 foot, which is 5'11", and even still, like this person's, like this model, if I were to stand next to it in real life, would still be more muscular than I am, because this is a Spartan. This is a super soldier. So this is going to be. It looks thin, but trust me, it's more muscular than most people. So it still has more body mass on it. So it's still. So imagine the male, which has even more larger muscles on it, doesn't quite fit the average person's body type, even for a muscular fit person, because I'm pretty toned. But it's still, like I said, I still wouldn't compare to this. So this would allow a more wider variety of body types to be able to fit without having to do much adjustment. Another thing too that changes is the biceps, and then the hip. The legs don't change, the arms don't change, the hands don't change. None of this changes. Only these only these 3 pieces change, and that's more so for this position and scale a little bit, like how much closer these pieces are together, as opposed to, I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock because I've got 10 minutes before I get back to work, because I'm on lunch break. If I remove this too, you can also see like this bodysuit also has certain features on it, that extruding features on it, like the back here. It's like a tumor, but that's actually part of the tech suit that also help fill out inside the armor. So the other thing about too is that the tech suit is also filling out some of the space. So you don't need to be beefy and muscular. You just gotta to fit inside the suit, because like I said, this suit is also designed around the fact that this is a very irregular tech suit. That's probably where an oxygen supply is and everything else. Don't know exactly, but that's it serves a purpose and a function on the tech. So so this is essentially what it looks like in it. What person is going to look like inside of it, but that's why I went with the female variant. Right now, I am going through each and every piece, and I am hardening the edges of essentially all the silhouette changing detail. All the geometry that's already sitting here, I am going through on each edge, and I am hardening all these edges. Because this is, when you're working on a game mesh, when you're doing a high-res game mesh, game mesh is always going to be low. You want to make it as low resolution as possible, because you want to limit the number of polygons, because the less polygons that each object has in it, the more objects you could have in the scene without taxing the game engine. So you want to try to get things as low as possible. So you only focus when you take the high res and you do the high res sculpt. You only want to focus on the detail. When you're doing the low res mesh, you only want to try and capture the detail that is going to change the silhouette. So like I said, all this detail changes the silhouette. Anything that might be too in depth to change to actually look to capture across properly with the normal map. Everything else gets baked into the normal map. This seam, they put geometry here for this scene, but I am going to actually use a boolean, let's call it Boolean, to remove these seams out, to actually cut these seams into the model. But so I'm going to go through, harden all these, so when I smooth it, so we take off, if I go back to 5, if I click on this and I go to smooth preview, which is my 3 key, this is what it looks like smoothed. This is hard. So this is what it looks hard, and this is after I smooth the model. This is what it looks like. So I'm preserving all these edges so that when I smooth it, I don't lose any detail. I don't lose that silhouette. And then I'm going to go in with a Boolean, in a Boolean operation. So if you go up here, my menus, I'm going to my mesh Booleans, you got union, difference, intersection. So what union does, it takes two models, and if I were to insert two models into one another, let's get a cube. I'll do a quick class here for a second. So Boolean. So I got a cube. We got another cube. Duplicate this. Got two cubes. Let's scale it inward. So we got two cubes. So these are two separate models. Let's turn on my wireframe. So these are two separate pieces, of course. Now I want to combine them into one piece. One piece of geometry, no intersection, because as you can see, this is intersected inside the model. I don't want these intersected. I want these actually be connected together, not just as one selectable model, but an actual combined mesh. So I'm going to go Boolean. So I'm going to select one of the cubes, select the other cube, and I'm going to go to mesh, and I'm going to go Boolean. And I'm going to go union. Boom. These are now combined. As you can see, inside, it has combined it, removed the intersection, and added geometry there. Now, there still have to be cleanup because you want to make sure your faces are quadded. Which, what that means is you want to make sure that all faces have at least 4 sides. You can go 3 sides because game mesh, like I said, this game mesh is triangulated. So each one of these faces has 3 sides. But you don't want to have n-gons, which is basically any face that has more than 4 sides to it. So 5 or more sides, you don't want that. So I would come in here, multicolored tool, and I would come in and I would, and I would cut in to make sure that these are quadded or triangulated. So that's clean geometry. So you still have to do some cleanup. But this is one mesh. This isn't separate. These are all connected, which makes it easier for 3D printing because you can jam objects together, export it out as an OBJ or an STL, and then bring it into a program, and it will print it as if it's one object. But it can cause some issues. It also causes some slicing issues because now it has to calculate the fact. It basically does a Boolean and has to now have to calculate that, and it has to calculate the n-gon that you just created. So we can do a difference though. If I select the object, so I want to take this out of this. So I want to select this first, select this, edit mesh, or go to mesh, Boolean, difference. I've just removed that square from this one. And that is essentially what I'm going to be doing with this model. I'm going to be modeling the detail, modeling these details, and then I'm going to be using a Boolean to then remove that modeled detail from the mesh after it's smoothed. The same thing happens, it creates n-gons. So, move this over here out of the way. So the same thing's going to happen, it creates n-gons, so these would normally have to be corrected. Once I get one of these pieces done, and because I'm going to have all these n-gons, what I'll do is I'll bring it into ZBrush, and then I'll Dynamesh it, and Dynamesh it, I'll do a Dynamesh which will then create will create a live object that creates new geometry in order to fit the shape that you're sculpting it to. Dynameshing will immediately triangulate this object for me. And then I'll use a Z-remesher to bring it back into quadded state, and then I'll be able to reduce it down to a more manageable, because this Dynamesh it will put this thing into millions of polygons. Then I'll remesh it, and then I'll decimate it and bring it back into a acceptable level of polygons, because this needs to be super high res, so it needs to have a lot of polygons in order for it to print smoothly and properly. But I don't want to try and slice an object that has 30 million polygons in it. I want to bring that down. Honestly, I can bring that down under 1 million. There's no reason that any piece on this needs to be over 1 million polygons. 500,000 is even stretching it for a lot of things. So I'll have to, and that way I'll have uniform geometry that'll print properly. Same thing with the thickness. I'm not just going to extrude the inside and then have that, because then you have, I want to limit the amount of support that you need, as well as removing supports, because printing this support material is going to be, is going to eat up a lot of your filament and a lot of your resources, and you don't want to have to print a ton of support, lose a lot of your material just on printing supports. So I'm going to be making this so that the support, based on the angle, you still have to have supports. Especially you're going to have the supports. They're not going to be able to make this without supports. But I am going to try and that was one of my issues that I had with that's one of the issues that I had with the model in the first place, was when I was printing this, was that I wasn't just printing all this. I had the support material that was supporting outside shapes, but I had all the support material that was printing the inside shapes, because it was the same shape that was being supported on the outside, but it also had to be supported on the inside, because it's a direct extrusion of these faces inward. So for instance, honestly, this model itself is pretty clean, but if I were to put in this edge, if I were to actually recess this edge, suddenly that edge now needs to be supported, and then now we're to extrude it inward. Now I have to support it on the inside. I don't have to support that on the inside. I want all this detail to reside, the recessed detail to reside where the infill on the model would be, instead of having to go through and actually changing the back. So I want this to be flat as possible on the inside, but then printed the detail on the outside. And that's the thing that wasn't taken into account when the version that I printed, the model that I used for that wasn't taken into account. So I used a lot of support material just printing supports. Like the chest plate, I could have printed the chest and back with a 1 kilogram spool, but it took 1 spool a piece because of all the support material that I had to use. Also, breaking it up into smaller parts like this, whereas this is separate, where this is separate, and this is separate, this will require less support material to print, because there's less overhangs to support. So, like I said, I'm going to have this, gotta get back to work in a second, but I have to, this will wrap around, so I'm printing this, so this will be a separate piece that you can print out of whatever you want. You can print this out of a TPU material, which is a flexible type of filament, because this is going to be hard on your shoulders. If you have a flexible rubber filament, you can print this piece out of it, and then the same thing with this. You can print this out of that as well. That just makes it easier on you when you're not having this hard plastic sticking into your side and on your shoulder. This cod piece is actually in 3 separate pieces, and they're actually layered differently. So the back plate overlayers the front plate, as you can see. So this is actually overlapping. This is actually designed to overlap. So whereas my issue was, mine was designed, these 2 pieces met at one point. They didn't overlap, they didn't underlap. They met at one point, which made fitting them difficult. And then this is a buckle. So this is actually, so following this design, this is actually, this will be able to underlap, so you can scale it, so you'll be able to scale it out, and be able to fit this armor to you without having to do much scaling on it, because of that. You might have to play around because of the width of the armor to fit onto your hips properly. But you'll definitely be able to compare to the front to the back from your, especially if you have a big butt, or massive junk, you'll have a space in between here. You'll be able to adjust the scale without actually having to rescale these pieces. You'll be able to fit them properly and be able to actually get them so they fit tightly enough that this doesn't slide off your waist. Because again, this sits on the waist, not on the hip. Coming into here, this, not much to this. The actual model, going back to the model that I used, the reason why I replaced this piece on my armor was because this was one big modeled as one big square. One big rectangle. It didn't have any curvature in it at all. This one, as you can clearly see, there's a lot of curvature here because your legs are round. So this is going to be a lot better. Also, it covers more in the back. Again, looking at the suit, it is sitting below the hip, not on the hip. This is actually kind of sitting a little bit above the hip, but it's sitting between the hip and the waist. Because actually your waist right here, so it's actually sitting right there where your love handles are. This is actually where you want it. You can have it up here or down here, whichever one. This is the area. You don't want it sitting here. You want it sitting on the love handle or up. On the other model, this was the one that I made, 1.0. These were two separate pieces. As you can clearly see, this is all meant to be one piece, and I intend to keep it that way. Here, as I mentioned before, there was that area in the back that was preventing my leg from fitting in it. Clearly, that's not in the model. I'm actually going to make this on the front. You notice I have this segment that's cut out on the front on 1.0. I'm actually going to make it so that this piece back here is what gets cut out. So this will actually be removable. So I'm going to cut this model along the seam and actually have this as a separate piece. So your heel will push back against this to push it through and fit in, as opposed to where I was doing it on the front. Again, it doesn't. You have the big room for the calf, but you don't have that big recess in there, which for some reason, I couldn't get my foot in there through the life of me without having to cut out the front plate. I actually might be able to, this alone, without having to do any cuts, I would most definitely be able to get my foot. I would probably be able to get my foot through this. Easy enough. But I will be cutting out the back just because not everyone's ankles are as flexible. So I will be cutting that out. So you'll be able to get your foot in and out of there easy. You'll be able to fit these pieces together easily without having to scale them very much beyond what is. Like, say, if you're a bigger person, you're a shorter person, you're a taller person, you'll have to scale it. But that's more of a global scale than an actual actually having to manually scale, make this wider, make this thinner. You just be able to globally scale it and then fine tune the scaling for pieces like these and this to be able to fit. Same thing with this. These are separate pieces. These are intended to be pieces. There's no inside piece here. There doesn't need to be. You don't need to have one there. It's an inside of the arm. Not a lot of people are going to see it. But these two pieces are separate, and they fold under this piece, as opposed to the other one where they all met together. They were all designed to meet together. These they actually designed to fold under it, as opposed to. So you don't have to rescale these very much. These should fit your arm because again it slides under this plate, not on top of it, and it doesn't meet it edge to edge. So, yeah, I'm actually supposed to be at work right now, but just to quick finish this up. Just kind of, here's the old piece. Here's the old armor. As you can see, differences. The back sits a lot further back. This sits further up and off to the side. This tapers inward. This doesn't go nearly as far out. Again, you see what I was talking about, where it's like, here's your point, here's where your shoulder's actually moving, and then here's how far this is going out. You will still be able to fit your arm. You'll have a lot of range of movement with this design. over the other one. Again, coming up, sitting too high. It's going. It's not it's wrapping around on top of the rib cage, not underneath it, and at the back. Kind of close to the same distance, but a little bit further down. Want to fill that gap. Yeah. Another thing that I plan on making too, as opposed to the armor, is that I'm going to be making this midsection here. If I remove my wireframe, I'm going to be making this midsection here because you want to have something to fill in that gap, that empty space on your bodysuit. I'll be doing the spine across the back, but I will be doing like this little area right here. That way, when you print out a TPU or whatever you want, you'll be able to print this out and then attach it to your bodysuit and overlay it under your bodysuit, so you have some sort of gap filler for the empty space in between. Same thing on the thigh. I'll probably do this. I'll probably do some of that paneling, like you see in Master Chief's the Mark 6 armor, out of this, just because it kind of fills that inner thigh there. Well, yeah. So that's plans for version 2. As I said, I'm going through hardening all the edges, so get rid of you. So I'm mostly done. I only got a few more pieces left to do. Actually, I've got the leg, and then here to finish, and then that's it. And then I can start doing the booleans, which is just basically just taking in all these recesses and everything else, which should be super easy to do. It's not going to be complex. So once I get all the hardened edges, I'm halfway done. And then do the thicknesses and everything else. And yeah, it'll be done. So that's all I want to show you right now. I'm also working on a Superman design. So I made my logo and my belt. So I'm going to be making cuffs and trims for the boots. But these will be, I'm going to actually print these out and make molds of these, and then use a polyurethane rubber with the mold to make the logo and the belt and everything else, and it'll look cool. But that'll be a whole another project, whole another video. Again, Terra armor is going to be the next armor that I work on, because it wouldn't make sense to make version 2.0 right after version 1. It'd be boring to see me make, oh, he's making more Halo armor after making Halo armor. But I mean, if you guys really want to see me make 2.0, I don't mind doing it sooner. It's going to take a lot longer to do. I'm not going to rush it, because I'm going to take my time with it and put in all the extra work and effort that I had not intended to put, that I didn't put into this armor for specific reasons. But yeah. So yeah, that's everything. That's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoy. Like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know. Let me know what you think. If you have any ideas on any of this, feel free to lend me your knowledge and everything else. I'll be posting a big thread on the 405th forums after this. Also, congratulations! This is the only video that I'm actually gonna have to edit. It'll be my first edited video. But yeah, so I'll see you guys later. Like I said, feel free to message me, leave comments, everything else. Let me know if you want to see me work on version 2.0 instead of Terra. That's fine. I still want to work on Terra, but I mean, I want to work on all of these at the same time. But if you let me know what you guys want me to actually focus on for my next vlog. Do you want to see 2.0 going? Do you want to see Terra? Do you want to see Superman? Feel free to let me know, and I'll see what I can do. Also, if you guys have requests, like I said, I plan on making this full suit and then sharing it so that everyone can download it and print it. And if you'd like to see a specific type of armor, you want me to make a conversion for a specific type of armor set from Halo 5, Halo 4, Halo 3, Halo Infinite, when that comes out, that one's gonna have some pretty awesome armors in it. I can't wait for that. I'm gonna fangirl so hard when that game comes out. Let me know, and because again, my suit might change because I might see a Halo 5 armor that suits my fancy, or Halo Infinite armor that suits my fancy. So let me know if there's any specific, if you have any specific requests that I might do. I'm more than happy to do more of these. I'm probably not gonna do all the sets because that's a lot of work. But I mean, I don't mind doing popular suggestions. So please let me know. All right, I'll catch you guys later. Bye.